Hey guys, tonight we sink into the frostbitten shadows of a place you probably wouldn't survive, Stalin's Gulag. Imagine this: your journey doesn't begin with a cell, but with a train. Not a nice overnight sleeper with a dining car, mind you. You're jammed into a cattle wagon where the word comfort is as extinct as the dinosaurs. You share your square of floor with strangers who smell like fear and old boots, and the air tastes of dust, sweat, and something faintly metallic maybe. The nails holding these wooden planks together may be the dread in your chest. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The train rattles on, wheels screeching like they're in pain. You sway with every violent jolt, knees aching because sitting means crouching, and lying down is impossible unless you enjoy using another prisoner's ribs as your pillow. Outside, Siberia stretches into forever white wastelands and forests, so dense they could swallow whole armies. Historians still argue whether Stalin planned the gulags as purely economic engines to exploit forced labor, or as a political weapon to break spirits. Standing here, clutching your thin coat, you figure the answer doesn't matter much. Both feel true. At night, the car turns into a coffin of condensation. Breath fogs against the boards, drips back down your neck. Someone mutters a joke about how, if the train doesn't kill you, the camp surely will. You want to laugh, but your teeth chatter instead. Every few hours, the train shudders to a stop. Guards slam open the doors, rifles glinting, dogs barking. Prisoners stumble out to relieve themselves in the snow under the watch of searchlights. Sometimes, one doesn't climb back in fast enough. The guards don't shout warnings, they just shut the doors. The man's cry echoes once, and then the train lurches forward again, leaving him behind with wolves and silence. There's a strange economy inside this moving prison. A crust of bread can buy you a place by the wall where the cold drafts are. Slightly less cruel, a cigarette butt passed around becomes a sacred ritual, sparking whispers of home, of Moscow streets, of mothers who baked piroshki. The irony isn't lost. Here you are, riding a train through one of history's most infamous experiments in human endurance, and the biggest luxury is being allowed to lean your head against splintering wood. The guards outside aren't monsters. From stories, they're just men, bundled in thick fur coats, pacing the platform when the train halts. Some look bored, some look cruel. You wonder which kind you'll meet more often when the gates finally appear. One guy whispers that he heard of a guard who used to toss frozen potatoes into the wagon just to watch men scramble and bite their fingers raw. Another swears there was once a soldier who slipped his extra ration to a boy. Truth or rumor, you can't tell, but the possibility of either twists uneasily in your chest. The days blur together. You measure time by the groaning stops and the taste of thin soup ladled into dented tins. At some point, second day, third, your legs go numb, then your thoughts start circling the same questions. How far is Siberia? Will you ever see home again? And most pressing, why does the train smell so much like damp wool and hopelessness? That's your third joke for tonight. Yes, hopelessness has a smell, and it's not a candle bath, and Bodyworks is ever going to release. As the journey stretches on, the sense of being erased grows. You're not a citizen, or even a prisoner with a case file anymore. Your cargo, anonymous, replaceable, rattling along steel tracks, hammered down across an empire too vast for maps to feel real. The cattle car is your preview theater for the Gulag itself, cramped, cold, and ruled by rules you didn't get to vote on. When the doors finally creak open for the last time, daylight slices in, you squint against the snow glare, heart pounding. Ahead, beyond the guard towers and coils of wire, you glimpse your new home. And just like that, you step down from the train into a story where every breath will feel borrowed. The first thing that hits you isn't the wind, it's the silence. Siberia doesn't hum like a city. There's no clatter of trams, no market chatter, not even the familiar rumble of distant roads. Just snow crunching under boots and the barking of guard dogs that sound like they'd rather eat you than herd you. Ahead, a double line of barbed wire shimmers under frost, stretching endlessly in both directions. It looks less like a fence and more like the edge of the world. You shuffle forward with the column, boots too thin for the frozen ground. The guards herd you through a wooden gate, rifles lazily pointed, as if they know no one's foolish enough to make a break for it. And yet, historians still argue whether escape attempts were as rare as the records suggest, or if they were simply erased, buried along with the men who tried. From where you stand, one glance at the blinding tundra is enough to make you think most prisoners didn't bother. Siberia is the perfect guard, merciless, tireless, and everywhere. A gust of wind slaps your face. The dogs strain at their leashes, teeth bared. Behind them, the camp unfolds. Watchtowers with spotlights, wooden barracks leaning like drunks, smoke curling from thin chimneys. Somewhere in that maze, you'll be told where to sleep, where to eat, where to work, and, most importantly, where not to stand unless you want to find out how fast bullets travel in the cold air. They march you past the first guard tower, and you feel the gaze of the man inside. He isn't much older than you, cheeks red from wind, hands snug around the stock of his rifle. He doesn't sneer, doesn't smile, just watches. It's unsettling, like being measured for a role you didn't audition for at the checkpoint. You're ordered to line up. The guards bark names, some Russian, some Ukrainian, some Polish, all swallowed by the wind. You hear coughing, see men stumble, feel the weight of exhaustion pressing everyone down. Someone drops a small bundle, a scarf, maybe the last gift from homehand before he can bend to retrieve it. A boot kicks it into the snowdrift. Gone. That's the first rule you learn. Nothing is really yours here, from inside the camp. You catch a whiff of smoke mixed with something sour, maybe boiled cabbage. It's almost funny your stomach growls at the thought, but the smell itself is hardly appetizing. Later, you'll learn that camp soup is usually water that cabbage once waved hello to. For now, though, it smells like survival. The gates swing wider, and you're herded through. The sound of the hinges creaking lingers in your mind. They don't slam shut behind you with a dramatic clang, no. They just groan back into place, like the camp is yawning and swallowing you whole. Inside, other prisoners glance up from their shovels, from hauling logs, from trudging in lines to some unseen worksite. Their faces are unreadable masks, hollow eyes studying you, not out of kindness but calculation. Are you weak? Are you strong? Do you have bread hidden in your pockets? In the Gulag, curiosity isn't friendly, it's survival strategy. One older man coughs and mutters under his breath, "Welcome to the zone." Not a smile, not even a glance in your direction, just the words tossed into the snow. You'll hear that phrase a lot, the zone. It sounds almost casual, but it's shorthand for the universe you now belong to. Beyond the barbed wire, there's life. Inside it, there's existence. Not living, just existing. There's a lesser-known detail about these first moments. Guards, often made prisoners, march around the perimeter, before assigning them to barracks, partly to intimidate, partly to show them how small they were compared to the endless fence. You can almost feel the psychological weight of it pressing down. Look how far the wire stretches, how high the towers stand, how alone you truly are. As dusk approaches, the floodlights crackle to life. Their glow slices through the camp, harsh and sterile. Shadows stretch long and thin, making prisoners look like stick figures dancing in misery. Somewhere, a dog growls. Somewhere else, a whistle blows, sharp and cold. You get the feeling the camp itself is alive, breathing, pulsing, and you've just been absorbed into its bloodstream. And here's your second joke. Because even gulags deserve a little gallows humor. You've officially checked into the world's worst all-inclusive resort. Barbed wire view. Check. Free snow in unlimited quantities. Check. And yes, activities will be provided, mostly backbreaking labor. But hey, variety is overrated anyway. The line moves again, pushing you deeper inside. The gate is behind you now, swallowed by the crowd. Ahead, a squat building with smoke leaking from the chimney beckons the intake office. Paperwork awaits, because even in the middle of Siberia, bureaucracy never freezes. You glance up one last time at the barbed wire haloed in light. Somewhere beyond it, trains are still moving, cities still buzzing, families still eating dinner. But for you, that world just shut its door. The Gulag has opened its arms, and you're not sure which feels colder, the Siberian wind or that welcome. The door to the intake building creaks open, and the warmth inside should feel like relief. Instead, it stings your face, sharp as needles, because your skin is too cold to trust the sensation. The room smells of ink, tobacco, and something sour sweat, baked into wood. Guards sit behind desks, their fur hats casting long shadows across their eyes. They don't need to shout. The clatter of typewriters does it for them. You shuffle forward with the others, every step echoing in the silence. A guard gestures. You step into the center of the room. Without warning, scissors flash. Your hair falls in clumps to the floor, tumbling like forgotten pages torn from a book. You run your hand across your skolets, prickly, foreign. In that moment, you realize they're not just cutting hair. They're cutting away what makes you, you. No identity, no style, no choice. Just another shaved head in a sea of shaved heads. Historians still argue whether this ritual was primarily about hygiene, lice ran rampant in close quarters, or about stripping individuality to enforce control. Standing here, feeling bare and oddly smaller, you don't care which answer is right. Both feel like truth. You aren't a person anymore. Your inventory. Next comes the uniform issue, if you can call it that. You're handed a set of prison clothes, rough cotton tunic, trousers, boots, stiff with someone else's sweat. Nothing fits. Too big or too small. Sleeves hanging past your hands, or boots rubbing your heels raw. A belt that looks like it's been gnawed by rats holds the whole disaster together. If you're lucky, the clothes are merely uncomfortable. If not, they're crawling with fleas from the last poor soul who wore them. Congratulations, you've joined the worst fashion line the Soviet Union ever produced. Paris might have Coco Chanel. You've got burlap chic. The final indignity comes when they give you a number. No name, no story, just digits. One prisoner whispers that names are for the living, numbers are for the damned. You're tempted to roll your eyes, but deep down you know he isn't wrong. After this ritual, you're herded into a washroom. The water is freezing, and the soap is more sand than soap. You scrub until your skin burns, but the cold sticks anyway, burrowing under your bones. Some men mutter curses. Others hum songs under their breath, small rebellions against the process. One even jokes, "At least the lice get a free sauna today." You almost laugh, almost. When you leave the washroom, you step over the pile of hair left behind. It looks like a strange kind of carpet, a reminder of everything already taken. Somewhere in that tangle is your old self, the version who thought life couldn't get worse. That version was wrong. A lesser-known detail about Gulag processing. Some prisoners recalled that guards deliberately shaved heads unevenly, leaving patches or jagged edges, a form of humiliation. You can picture the smirk on a guard's face as he shears a prisoner into looking ridiculous. Even cruelty had layers, here some sharp, some petty, all deliberate. Once the shaving and scrubbing are over, you're marched into the barracks. It's your first real glimpse of where you'll sleep, or at least collapse. The room is long, dim, lined with wooden bunks stacked 2 or 3 high. The air smells of damp straw and unwashed bodies. You climb onto a plank that's supposed to be a bed, your thin blanket already stiff with frost. The man beside you mutters something in Polish. You don't understand the words, but you understand the tone, resignation, and here's your first joke for tonight's section. When people say fresh start, they don't usually mean get shaved bald and issued trousers that smell like boiled onions. But hey, life's full of surprises. As you lie back on your board, the shaved head against rough wood, you realize the ritual worked. You feel exposed, smaller, interchangeable. It's no accident. The Gulag has already begun reshaping you, carving away individuality until you fit the mold of prisoner. Tomorrow, the work will begin. Tomorrow, the camp will demand more than hair, more than clothes, more than dignity. But for tonight, the sound of shears still buzzes in your ears, and you know it was only the first cut. The first night in the barracks is like a slap you don't see coming. You think you'll finally collapse into something resembling sleep, but instead, you find yourself lying rigid on a plank of wood that's technically called a bunk. The mattress, if you can call it that, is nothing more than straw stuffed into a sack. The sack has holes, the straw leaks, and the straw itself, damp, prickly, and smelling faintly of mildew. You shift, you scratch, you sigh, and then you give up. Comfort isn't part of the package. Above you, another prisoner shifts, the wooden frame groaning. Every creak sends dust into your eyes. On either side, men cough and toss, the air thick with sour breath and the unmistakable stench of unwashed bodies. The room has one small iron stove in the center, glowing faintly, but the heat barely reaches the bunks along the walls. By the time it drifts over, it's little more than a lukewarm sigh against your face. Cold crawls in through every crack in the barrack walls. It's the kind of cold that doesn't just sit on your skin, but slides under it, like a knife slipping under cloth. You pull the blanket tight, but it's laughably thin, riddled with holes. You joke to yourself that maybe the holes are for airflow, a Soviet luxury feature. But really, the blanket is about as useful as paper in a snowstorm. Sleep, when it finally comes, is shallow. You dream of warm kitchens, of heavy quilts, of windows that rattle not from wind but from the laughter of family. Then you wake to the reality, frost forming on the inside of the barrack beams, your breath rising in white clouds, the straw beneath you crunching stiff with ice. Somewhere in the night, a prisoner snores so loudly it rattles like a motorbike, sputtering to life. Another mutters nonsense in his sleep. You're reminded of a quirky detail historians sometimes mention. Gulag prisoners often developed what they called camp ears, the ability to sleep through every noise except the Sound of a guard's boots approaching. Tonight, though, you don't have camp ears yet. Every shuffle, cough, and crack of timber jolts you awake by morning. You're more exhausted than when you lay down. The guards bang open the barrack doors, yelling, herding everyone out into the brittle dawn. You stumble into line, knees stiff, lips cracked. A wave of cold air rushes in as the doors swing wide, and for a moment, you almost prefer the foul warmth of the barracks. Almost historians still argue whether the overcrowding was intentional cruelty or simply the result of too many arrests flooding the system. Either way, the numbers don't lie. Dozens of men, crammed into spaces built for half as many, sharing straw, blankets, even body heat when things grew desperate enough. You look around and realize you're not living in a barrack. You're living in a sardine tin that happens to breathe at the far end of the room. You spot a barrel used as a makeshift toilet. The smell explains itself before anyone tells you what it is. Prisoners shuffle to it in the night, muttering curses, trying not to stumble. You think of the cattle car from the journey here, the stench of hopelessness, and realize the barracks are just an extension of that stationary, but no more humane. And here's joke number 2, because without them, the gloom sticks too hard. Welcome to your Airbnb Siberia edition. Great rustic vibes, authentic Soviet experience, and best part, no checkout time. Well, unless you count mortality. When the guards bark orders, you're forced outside into the gray morning. Behind you, the barracks loom, wooden skeletons, held together by frost. You catch yourself shivering, but not just from the cold, from the realization that this is only night 1. Hundreds, maybe thousands more lie ahead. The cold barracks are more than shelter. They're lessons carved in wood and frost, that comfort is gone, that warmth is rationed, that survival will mean lowering your standards until a thin blanket feels like treasure. You'll never look at your bed back home the same way again if you ever see it. The morning whistle pierces your ears like a nail driven into wood. You jolt awake, though to be fair, you were never really asleep. The barracks stir, prisoners fumbling with boots, coughing into their hands, tugging threadbare tunics tighter. Outside, the Siberian dawn waits with its favorite trick, a wind so sharp it feels like it could slice your ears clean off. You shuffle into line, one among hundreds. The snow crunches beneath your boots, and already you feel your toes going numb. Roll call isn't just a formality, here it's a ritual of endurance. Guards pace up and down the line, rifles slung casually, as if daring you to faint. You stand still, breath rising in clouds, your jaw locked to keep your teeth from clattering like dice in a cup. The process drags on for hours, names barked, numbers double-checked, men recounted again and again, as if the guards expect one of you to evaporate into the snow. Your nose runs, but you don't dare wipe it with your sleeve. Movement means suspicion, and suspicion earns punishment. So you let the snot freeze, a badge of involuntary suffering. Historians still argue about the purpose of such grueling roll calls. Was it paranoia, fear of escapes, of missed counts, or was it deliberate cruelty, breaking bodies before the day's labor even began? You don't need a textbook to guess. Standing here, your feet blocks of ice, your breath burning in your throat, it feels like both. A man beside you collapses, knees buckling, face first into the snow. The line doesn't break. No one dares step out to help. A guard strides over, boots crunching, and prods the man with the barrel of his rifle. When the prisoner doesn't move, he's dragged aside like a sack of flour. The roll call continues, uninterrupted. That's lesson number 2 of Gulag life. The line never stops. For you, Some prisoners mutter prayers under their breath. Others stare at the horizon, blank-eyed, lost in thoughts of home. You fix your gaze on the watchtower, on the guard silhouetted against the sky. He looks as frozen as you, shifting from foot to foot, breath puffing through his scarf. You almost feel sorry for him, almost. Then you remember he has boots with felt linings. You don't. There's a quirky detail here. Prisoners sometimes counted the roll call, not by names, but by the frostbite they noticed creeping over their own fingers. It sounds like a grim joke, but in the Gulag, jokes and coping mechanisms are often the same thing. You wiggle your fingers inside your stiff gloves and decide you're not ready to add yourself to that tally. The sun finally peeks over the tree line, a pale disk offering no warmth. You're ordered to stand straighter, chest out, as if posture might ward off the cold. A guard sneezes, and you almost smile at the absurdity. Turns out even the men with rifles can't escape Siberian noses. That's joke number 1 for this section. The Gulag may break you, but at least it treats everyone equally when it comes to frostbite and runny noses. Minutes stretch into hours, hours into something unmeasurable. Your mind wanders. You picture home, the sound of clinking teacups, the smell of bread baking, the warmth of a stove. You snap back when someone coughs so violently they spit blood into the snow. The crimson melts into the white, a stain that spreads and then vanishes. By the time roll call ends, your body feels hollow, like you've been carved out from the inside. You're herded toward the worksite, legs stiff, back aching from nothing more than standing still. Funny, isn't it? You thought work would be the hardest part. Turns out, just standing there, motionless, breathing frost, already feels like torture. And that's the point. The Gulag isn't designed just to work you to death. It's designed to make every moment, from lying on your plank to standing in the cold, 2 moving stones in the snow feel like a rehearsal for misery. And in that sense, roll call is the perfect warm-up, well cold up. You get the idea. The roll call ends not with relief, but with a barked order. You're herded in groups toward the day's assignment, boots crunching in rhythm like an unwilling army. Some of you will cut timber, others will quarry stone, and the unlucky ones, well, they'll be sent to dig into frozen earth with shovels so blunt they're basically spoons. Guess where you end up? Yep, Spoon Brigade. The ground looks harmless enough, just snow and ice. But underneath is permafrost, hard as steel. You drive the shovel down and it bounces back, rattling your wrists. Again, again, again. Sparks fly sometimes, like you're mining rock instead of soil. After an hour, your hands are raw, your breath ragged, and your progress laughable. A dent the size of a soup bowl. A guard paces nearby, fur hat pulled low, rifle slung across his shoulder. He watches with bored eyes, but you can feel the threat behind them. Slow down, and you'll get a shove. Stop, and you'll get worse. One prisoner, older, already stooped, collapses to his knees. The guard kicks snow in his face, snarls something, and the man staggers back up, hacking at the ground again. Here, weakness isn't just punished, it's erased. Historians still argue whether the labor in gulags was about producing results timber, or railroads are simply about grinding prisoners down. The evidence points both ways. Some camps fueled massive Soviet projects. Others demanded quotas so unrealistic they turned men into corpses long before they cut enough logs. Standing here, sweat freezing on your back, it's clear that efficiency was never the real goal. Misery was. You glance at the men around you. Pickaxes swing, shovels rise and fall, breaths come in ragged puffs. No one talks. Talking wastes air, wastes strength. Besides, what's there to say? That the sky is gray, the ground unyielding, the hours endless. Everyone knows. And yet, every so often, humor creeps in. A man mutters that he's digging a tunnel to America. Another swears he'll strike oil any moment now and retire rich. That's joke number 1 tonight. Because if you can't laugh at impossible fantasies, what else have you got? Lunch, when it comes, is no banquet. A ladle of watery soup with maybe a potato skin floating in it, a hunk of black bread so dense you could use it as a brick, but you swallow every drop, every crumb. Hunger has a way of making even cabbage vapor taste like feast day roast. There's a quirky detail here. Prisoners often tucked bread crusts into their sleeves or boots, hiding them like treasure. Not because they were full, no one was ever full, but because tomorrow might bring less. Bread wasn't food, it was currency, insurance, lifeline. One prisoner might trade his crust for gloves with fewer holes. Another might guard his like a dragon hoards gold. After the meal, you're shoved back to work. Hours blur into one another. The sun, weak and distant, crawls across the sky, then sinks too soon. By evening, your back feels splintered, your hands blistered, your bones hollowed out. You've hauled earth, moved logs, chipped away at rock, and for what? A trench so shallow it barely qualifies as a ditch. As darkness falls, guards bark again. Ordering the tools dropped, the prisoners lined up. You stagger back toward the camp, snow crunching underfoot, stomach gnawing at itself. Behind you, the worksite disappears into shadow, as if it never existed. Ahead, the watchtowers glow, floodlights carving the night. Here's joke number 2. Back home, people complain about their jobs, bad bosses, long commutes, boring paperwork. But paperwork never tried to freeze you to death. And your boss probably didn't carry a rifle. Unless you worked in retail, of course. By the time you stumble into the barracks, every muscle screams. You collapse onto your plank, too tired to even untie your boots. Around you, men groan, cough, or fall instantly asleep, faces slack with exhaustion. The stove sputters weakly, and frost creeps across the beams overhead. You realize the Gulag has a rhythm. Wake, freeze, stand, work, ache, collapse, repeat. Days don't pass, here they grind, and you're already part of the machine. By now, you've figured out the Gulag has its own economy. Not rubles, not coins, not gold. No, here, the only thing that matters is bread. A small, black, heavy slice that looks like something between a brick and a sponge. It's your lifeline, your bargaining chip, your fortune and your downfall, all at once. The ration is meager, maybe 400 grams if you worked well, less if you didn't. The bread is coarse, made of rye, sawdust, rumors, and despair. Okay, maybe not literal sawdust, but you wouldn't bet money against it. You hold your piece in both hands, staring at it like it's treasure, because it is. Prisoners quickly learn the math of survival. Eat it all at once, and you'll feel full for an hour, then hollow for the rest of the day. Save some for later, and you risk theft, or worse, the gnawing torture of smelling it, but not eating it. Some cut their bread into neat halves. Others nibble crumbs, slowly, pretending it stretches further. And then there are those who wolf it down instantly, licking fingers as though flavor lingers. Spoiler, it doesn't. Historians still argue about the exact nutritional value of Gulag bread. Some say it was just enough to keep you alive. Others insist it was deliberately underweight to ensure slow starvation. Standing here with a chunk in your hand, you're less concerned with calories than with survival. Here's a quirky detail. Bread could buy you almost anything. Want a pair of mittens with fewer holes? That'll cost you 2 bites. Need medicine? Smuggled from the infirmary, maybe half a slice. Feeling desperate enough to beg a hardened criminal for protection. Better hand over tomorrow's ration, too. Bread wasn't food. Bread was power, and yes, bread caused betrayal. Friends turned on each other over crumbs. Someone wakes to find their stash gone, and suddenly the entire barracks is eyeing each other like wolves. You hug your crust to your chest, as if your ribs could shield it. Tonight's first joke: forget Bitcoin, forget Wall Street. The true investment of the 1940s. Black bread with a side of frostbite. Returns guaranteed. Expiration date: tomorrow morning. When you finally bite into your ration, it's sour, chewy, sticks to your teeth. But you chew slowly, deliberately, letting each mouthful last as long as possible. The taste isn't pleasant, but it's grounding. It tells you you're still here, still alive, still trading hours of labor for this crumbly proof of existence. Occasionally, there are stories of men trading away their bread for tobacco, for a scrap of newspaper, even for nothing more than a story or song. Some say that's foolish, but maybe it's survival of a different kind. Your body craves calories, sure, but your soul craves moments that remind you you're human. As you lick the last grain from your palm, the barracks settle into uneasy quiet. A man whispers about the bread he used to bake at home, golden crust, soft crumb, the smell filling the kitchen. Another chuckles bitterly and says, "Don't talk about it, you'll drive us mad." Still, the image lingers. Warm kitchens, butter melting, knives slicing. For a moment, the Gulag walls fade, and then reality presses back. Tomorrow, more labor. Tomorrow, another thin ration. Tomorrow, another fight against the hunger that never leaves. Here's joke number 2. They say man cannot live by bread alone. True, but try surviving here without it. Spoiler alert, you won't. The Gulag doesn't need chains to bind you. It has bread. It teaches you that life itself can be reduced to a stale crust and the desperate hope that tomorrow's slice will come. Hunger in the Gulag isn't a passing discomfort, it's a second skeleton rattling around inside you, reminding you of itself with every breath. Morning, noon, night. Tits, always gnawing, always whispering, always demanding. You wake hungry, you work hungry, you sleep hungry. Even your dreams taste like food. Today's soup is ladled into a dented tin bowl, cloudy water with a cabbage leaf or two floating like lost sailors. Sometimes there's a stray potato cube, though calling it a cube is generous. It's more like a potato rumor. You raise the bowl to your lips anyway, sipping slowly, savoring the warmth as much as the taste. The soup slides down thin, but it burns with life. Prisoners learn to treat every meal like ritual. Some tilt the bowl carefully, chasing the tiniest scraps of cabbage. Others wipe the inside clean with their bread crust, leaving nothing wasted. You see a man lick the rim of his tin with the devotion of a worshipper at a shrine. Hunger makes monks of you all. Historians still argue whether starvation in the Gulag was deliberate policy or an unavoidable side effect of Siberian remoteness and bureaucratic incompetence. Standing here with your ribs poking out like fence posts, you can tell them the answer doesn't matter, planned or not. Hunger is still the camp's sharpest weapon. Quirky detail: some prisoners swore they could smell calories, claiming they knew the difference between 300 and 400 grams of bread by scent alone. Others invented imaginary recipes, trading them like currency, what you'd cook with butter, sugar, and flour if you had them. One man insists he knows 50 ways to prepare potatoes. Another claims to have invented a dish called air pie, made entirely of imagination and envy. Here's joke number 1. Forget Michelin stars. Gulag cuisine has only one rating, -5 stars. Frozen solid. Bon appétit. The hunger doesn't just hurt your stomach, it fogs your mind. You can't think straight. You forget words, stumble mid-sentence, lose track of hours. Some prisoners start chewing bark or gnawing leather straps, pretending it helps. Others sneak snow into their mouths, tricking their stomachs with volume instead of nutrition. You catch yourself staring at the soup ladle, calculating if you could lick it clean without being noticed. At night, the hunger follows you into the barracks. Men whisper recipes under their breath as lullabies. One prisoner swears he once dreamed of steak so real he woke up drooling on his blanket. Another laughs bitterly, saying he dreamt of bread and woke to find his rations stolen. Dreams, like rations, aren't safe here. You remember your own kitchen back home, the smell of fried onions, butter hissing in a pan, bread pulled fresh from the oven. The memory makes your stomach clench like a fist. You almost hate yourself for remembering almost, because memory, though cruel, is still proof you once lived differently. Here's joke number 2. You've heard of intermittent fasting, right? Trendy diet, big in the modern world. Well, congratulations. Stalin invented it first, just without the yoga mats and smoothie bowls. By now, you realize hunger isn't a stage of Gulag life. It is Gulag life. Work exhausts your body, cold numbs your skin, but hunger rewires your brain. It makes you barter, beg, dream, despair. It's the shadow that follows you longer than the WATCHTOWERS. When you finally drift into uneasy sleep, stomach howling, you understand the cruel genius of it. Hunger keeps you alive just enough to keep you working, but never enough to let you forget where you are. And tomorrow, the soup will taste like water again, and you'll drink it anyway. By now, you've learned that the Gulag isn't just run by guards in fur hats. It's run by prisoners themselves, or rather, by a hierarchy sharper than barbed wire. You quickly discover that not all inmates are equal. On one side are the politicals. Men and women accused of anti-Soviet crimes, maybe a farmer who grumbled about quotas, maybe a teacher who owned the wrong book, maybe someone who simply happened to know the wrong person. They tend to be idealists, intellectuals, dreamers utterly unprepared for the brutal life here. On the other side are the criminals, the blatnikarir, thieves, gangsters, murderers. These men know how to survive, and more importantly, how to dominate. The guards understand this. In fact, they encourage it. Why waste effort keeping prisoners in line when you can let criminals do it for you? The blatni get privileges, lighter work, better access to rations, sometimes even knives. In return, they keep everyone else in check through intimidation, theft, or worse. You learn fast. Don't argue with a thief. Don't look at his food. Don't even glance too long at his bunk. A crust of bread can vanish from under your head while you sleep, and when you wake up, good luck proving who took it. Even if you knew, what would you do? Complain to the guards. They'll laugh, maybe punish you for disturbing order. Historians still debate whether the Soviet system intended this prisoner hierarchy, or if it was just a convenient accident. Was it policy to empower the criminals as enforcers, or simply laziness from the guards? Either way, the effect was the same. Ordinary prisoners suffered twice over: once from the system, once from their fellow inmates. Quirky detail: some blatni developed elaborate tattoos, each symbol marking rank, history, and reputation. Stars inked on shoulders, churches across backs, cats or daggers crawling up arms. For them, tattoos were passports, telling others exactly who they were. For you, the unmarked newcomer, they're warnings, inked signs that scream, "Stay out of my way." One evening, you watch as a political prisoner, skinny, bookish, glasses fogged with frost, tries to save half his bread for later. A Blatnoy notices. Without a word, he strolls over, plucks the bread from the man's pocket, and walks away. The political prisoner protests weakly, hands trembling. The room goes still. Then the Blatnoy laughs, stuffs the bread in his mouth, and leaves crumbs on the floor. No guard interferes. No one else dares. That's the law of the camp. Here's joke number 1. Congratulations, you've entered a real-life board game. The rules are simple. The criminals always win. The politicals always lose. And the guards referee only when it's funny for them. Hope you enjoy playing. You adapt. You learn when to keep silent, when to step aside, when to clutch your ration so tightly the crust digs into your palm. You don't make eye contact. Don't volunteer information. Don't act clever. Cleverness gets noticed, and being noticed is dangerous. And yet, sometimes, the lines blur. A criminal might toss a scrap of bread to a starving man, or crack a joke that makes the whole barracks laugh. Moments like that confuse you. Maybe, just maybe, survival breeds strange alliances. Or maybe it's just another power play, another way to remind everyone who holds the strings. Here's joke number 2. You thought high school had cliques. Try surviving in a frozen prison where the bullies have knives and the teachers carry rifles. Suddenly, cafeteria politics doesn't seem so bad as nights pass. You realize the Gulag isn't just about cold, hunger, and labor. It's about people, how they arrange themselves, how they pray, how they endure. Barbed wire keeps you in, but it's this hierarchy that decides whether you sleep with bread in your pocket or none at all. By now, the barbed wire feels like part of the landscape. You stop staring at it, stop wondering what's beyond. But some prisoners never do. They watch the horizon like it's calling them, whispering that if they just ran far enough, fast enough, maybe they'd find freedom. Escape is the Gulag's forbidden dream. The camp doesn't chain you down because it doesn't need to. Siberia does the job. Snow stretches for hundreds of miles, forests dense as walls, rivers choked with ice. The nearest village might be weeks away, and villagers are more likely to turn you in than hide you, because helping a fugitive is a crime that earns you your own ticket to the Gulag. Still, men try. Whispers ripple through the barracks. Someone slipped away from the timber brigade. Someone vanished during latrine duty. Someone crawled under the wire when the floodlights flickered out. The next day, the guards line everyone up. Maybe they find the body frozen stiff in a drift. Maybe they drag back a half-dead figure mauled by wolves. Or maybe they say nothing, and you never know what happened. Historians still argue how many escape attempts truly succeeded. Some records claim almost none. Others suggest a few desperate souls managed to vanish into the forests, living with nomads or melting into remote villages. But for every rumor of success, there are 10 stories of failure, bodies frozen, shot, or eaten. The odds weren't just against you, they were impossible. There's a quirky detail here. Wolves really did stalk escapees. Locals sometimes said the animals learned to trail camps, waiting for the inevitable fool who tried to run. Imagine that your big break for freedom, and suddenly you're not racing guards, but outrunning Siberia's hungriest pack. Here's joke number 1. Running with the wolves sounds cool in rock songs. In Siberia, it's less of a metaphor and more of a terrifying cardio routine. Even if wolves didn't get you, the cold would. Prisoners told stories of men who ran, made it a day or two, and then staggered back on their own frostbitten, begging to be let inside the wire again. Imagine being so broken by nature that the Gulag itself feels safer. That's not just defeat, it's erasure of hope. Still, the dream lingers. Some prisoners whisper escape plans at night, how they'll cut through wire, steal boots, head south. Others carve maps on scraps of wood or recite rivers and landmarks from memory. You listen, part of you tempted, part of you scoffing. The smarter ones say the same thing. Escape isn't about distance, it's about blending in, about becoming invisible. Problem is, with a shaved head, prison rags, and a body half-starved, you look like exactly what you are, and yet hope is stubborn. Even here, you watch a man tuck a small compass into his boot, his eyes gleaming like he's already halfway home. You wonder if you'll see him again tomorrow. Spoiler, probably not. Here's joke number 2. Modern people love escape rooms, puzzles, clues, teamwork. The Gulag had its own version. Same concept, but the locked room is Siberia. And the prize for winning is not dying in the snow. Fun for the whole family. As you trudge back from labor one night, you glance at the horizon. The sunset paints the snow blood red, the forest a wall of black teeth. It looks almost beautiful, in a cruel way. And you think, for just a heartbeat, maybe you could run. Then the wind slaps your face, and your stomach growls, and the guards shove you forward. Escape is a word that lives only in whispers. Out loud, the Gulag makes sure it stays exactly what it is, a fantasy. The camp breaks you down with cold, hunger, and back-breaking labor. But sometimes, it doesn't even need to lift a finger. Disease takes over where the guards leave off. It creeps quietly, invisible at first, until suddenly half the barracks is coughing, shivering, or too weak to rise. By your second week, you begin to notice that the so-called infirmary isn't a place of healing at all. It's a holding pen, a dim wooden barrack where people go when their bodies can't keep pace anymore. Most don't come back. Coughs echo like gunfire in the night, sharp and hacking, leaving trails of blood on sleeves and straw. Lips split and bleed from the dry cold. Feet swell with frostbite until the skin blackens, splitting like charred logs. The smell of sickness clings to everything: sore, sweat, damp rags, and the metallic temps of blood that no amount of boiling water can wash away. You catch yourself holding your breath when you pass the infirmary door, as though air itself might infect you. Typhus is the monster everyone dreads. Lice carry it, and lice are everywhere. In the straw mattresses, in your clothes, crawling across scalps as casually as ants on sugar. A fever comes first, then delirium, then death. Dysentery is another demon your body, wrung dry, strength gone in a day, dignity gone in an hour, and pneumonia. Well, the freezing air and the damp barracks make sure of that. A cough today, a rattle tomorrow, silence the day after. You feel the sickness in yourself, too. The constant trembling that never leaves your hands. The ache in your spine when you stand too long. The dizziness that makes the snowy ground spin in circles when you bend to lift a log. Your reflection in a puddle startles you. You look pale, hollow-eyed, almost unrecognizable. You start to understand why veterans of the camps used to say, "A healthy man lasts 3 months here. A strong man, maybe 6. Historians still argue whether medical neglect in the gulags was deliberate policy or simply the result of impossible logistics. Siberia is vast, transport is slow, and medicine scarce. Was the Soviet state incapable of caring, or simply unwilling. Either way, the result is the same. Lying here with cracked lips and bleeding gums, you don't care which footnote historians favor. To you, the lack of treatment feels weaponized. When you're too busy fighting typhus, you don't have energy left to think of escape or rebellion. There are small, strange efforts at medicine. Garlic, cloves, handed out like golden tickets, chewed slowly, savored for their sting. A spoonful of fish oil pressed into your hand like liquid sunlight, even though it coats your tongue with nausea. Once, a nurse sprinkles powdered sulfur on the straw, swearing it will drive away lice. The lice don't care. They're the true kings of the camp, feasting on everyone equally. Quirky detail. Some prisoners swore they could predict who would die soon just by listening to the cough. A dry cough meant maybe you'd endure. A wet rattle meant the end was near. In the silence of the night, you start hearing coughs like ticking clocks, counting down lives in the darkness. The infirmary itself is dim, smoky, lined with bunks, squeezed so tight you wonder how anyone breathes. Prisoner orderlies shuffle about, hands raw from boiling sheets, eyes tired from watching too many fade away. Supplies are laughable. Rags instead of bandages, snow instead of ice packs, boiled pine needles masquerading as medicine. And yet, those orderlies still press damp cloths to foreheads, still lift spoons of soup to trembling lips. Here's joke number 1. You ever complain about waiting 2 hours to see your doctor? Try the Gulag. Here, you'll wait 2 days, and the only doctor available is probably just a fellow prisoner with less training than a Boy Scout. The good news, at least there's no copay. You watch men return from the infirmary, gaunt and trembling, their faces marked by the grim knowledge that they've survived this time. One man hobbles back, with feet wrapped in rags, where toes used to be. Another doesn't come back at all. At dawn, you see his body loaded onto a sled with others, taken beyond the fence. The snow swallows them without ceremony. You wonder if wolves follow those sled tracks, trailing the scent of mortality. And yet, even in the infirmary, moments of humanity flare up like embers. A prisoner drapes his own threadbare blanket over a fevered comrade. Another breaks his bread, ration in half, and presses the piece into the hand of a man too weak to chew without help. You wonder whether those gestures extend life, or if they simply make the final hours less lonely. Maybe that's enough. Here's joke number 2. They say laughter is the best medicine. In the Gulag, that's technically true, because it's also the only medicine left in stock. If you can make your bunkmate laugh at your misery, you've already given him something rarer than soup or bread. The truth is unavoidable. The guards don't need rifles to kill. The climate doesn't need blizzards to crush you. Disease does the job cleanly, quietly, relentlessly. In this frozen world, sickness is just another warden, invisible but everywhere. And unlike the guards, it doesn't take bribes, it doesn't sleep, and it never misses a shift. You learn quickly that the Gulag survives not only on labor and hunger, but also on silence. Every whisper, every scrap of rumor, every flicker of resistance feels like contraband. And yet, in the shadows of the barracks, whispers still find a way. It begins with songs. Late at night, when the guards are fewer and the barracks creak in uneasy sleep, you hear someone hum a tune. It's faint, almost swallowed by the wind pushing through the cracks. Maybe it's an old folk song, maybe a hymn, maybe a lullaby from home. Soon, a second voice joins, then another. The voices stay low, barely audible, as though even melody must tiptoe. But in those moments, the barrack feels less like a coffin and more like a human place again. Sometimes it's not music but words. A prisoner leans close, mutters a line of poetry, half remembered, half invented. Another scratches a symbol into a plank of wood with a nail, small enough to be mistaken for a splinter. A third carves initials on the underside of his bunk. A tiny rebellion that says, "I was here." To anyone else, it's nothing. To him, it's proof he hasn't vanished completely. Historians still argue whether these fragments of resistance mattered. Politically, whether they had the power to push back against the system more, if they were only personal lifelines. From where you sit, they matter more than rations. They feed something hunger and cold can't touch. Quirky detail in some camps. Prisoners devised invisible letters. They'd press messages into paper using a blunt object without ink, leaving faint indentations. Later, when the paper was held to the light, the words appeared like ghosts. Imagine the danger. One mistake, one careless glance, and the guards could add years or take your life. And yet, they wrote anyway. One night, you watch a group huddled near the stove, trading stories like bread. A man recites Pushkin's verses from memory, his voice trembling but steady. Another counters with a Ukrainian folktale. Then a Polish prisoner shares a joke about bureaucrats who could drown in ink before they ever noticed water. The men chuckle, softly, covering their mouths, the laughter as fragile as frost on glass. But it spreads warmth in a place that never gives any. Here's joke number 1. In a world where bread is currency, stories are like free samples. They won't fill your stomach, but they remind you you're still alive enough to crave more. Not all resistance is gentle. Some prisoners mutter curses about Stalin under their breath, quick and bitter. Others smuggle tiny notes through supply wagons, trying to reach families or foreign ears. You hear rumors of a man caught passing such a note. They say he vanished into a punishment cell and was never seen again. That's the cost of even the smallest act of defiance. And yet, silence is never absolute. The camp can starve you, shave you, bury you under frost, but it can't make you stop remembering songs. It can't make you forget words you learned as a child. And so, prisoners keep humming, keep whispering, keep scratching lines into wood, as if their voices were chisels against stone. Here's joke number 2. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. In the Gulag, the pen is usually broken, stolen, or eaten by rats. But give a prisoner a nail, and suddenly, wood becomes a library, lying. On your bunk, you trace the carvings left by others, initials, dates, symbols that look like mountains or rivers. You wonder if anyone will ever see them once you're gone, or if the wood will simply rot into silence. But even if it does, you know this much: for one night, 1 hour, 1 whisper. The camp didn't win completely. Resistance here isn't grand or fiery. It's not an uprising or a banner waved. It's a hum in the dark, a line of poetry scratched in secret, a whispered memory of home. Small things, but sometimes small things keep you alive longer than bread. The Gulag is a machine of contradictions. The guards are its gears cold steel, grinding endlessly. But like any machine, those gears aren't uniform. Some cut sharper than others, some grind smoother, and some, well, sometimes you glimpse the faintest hint of rust that looks suspiciously like humanity. Most days, the cruelty feels automatic. A guard's boot kicks you awake if you move too slowly. A rifle but knocks your ribs if you stumble in line. You're shouted at for standing too close or too far, or for no reason at all. Power here is exercised like breathing, thoughtless, constant, invisible until it hurts. Guards patrol with an easy swagger, rifles slung over their shoulders like extensions of their spines. Their dogs snap at prisoners' legs for fun, tongues lolling as though they're in on the joke. One afternoon, you see a guard make sport of a weakened man. The prisoner can't lift his log, his arms trembling too hard to hold it steady. The guard doesn't help, doesn't ignore. Instead, he orders the man to pick it up again, then drop it, then lift it, then drop it, then drop it over and over until the poor soul collapses into the snow. The guard laughs, a short, sharp sound. He turns to the rest of you and says, "Work makes you stronger." The irony stings like frostbite. Historians still argue about the psychology of Gulag guards. Were they true believers in Stalin's system, or were they simply men with power over the powerless, corrupted by the uniform and the rifle? From inside the camp, it doesn't matter. Their authority is absolute, and their moods are weather you can't predict. And yet, every so often, you see cracks in the steel. A guard presses a crust of bread into a starving prisoner's hand when no one's looking. Another mutters, "Keep your head down," as he passes you by, almost like advice instead of a threat. One night, you catch a guard lingering by the barracks stove, letting its warmth seep into his gloves. His eyes look hollow, not cruel. You realize he's just as frozen, just as trapped in Siberia as you are only. His uniform keeps him on one side of the fence. Here's joke number 1. People say, "Don't bite the hand that feeds you." In the Gulag, it's more like, "Don't get bitten by the hand that might feed you, starve you, or shoot you depending on the weather." There's another, lesser-known detail. Some guards were themselves barely older than boys, recruited straight from villages, half-trained, too. For them, the camp wasn't ideology, it was employment. Some hated prisoners, others pitied them, but most kept their expressions blank, as though erasing emotion kept them safe from their own superiors. You realize with a start that the guards are also being watched, judged, punished if they show too much leniency. Still, cruelty dominates. Punishments arrive without warning. Beatings, isolation, forced labor beyond endurance. A prisoner once caught sneaking potato peels from the kitchen is dragged out and beaten so badly he doesn't return. Another whispers that he saw a man shot for trying to warm his hands too close to a guard's fire. Whether the stories are true or half-invented, they all carry the same warning. Mercy is rare, risk is constant, but you can't help noticing that prisoners watch the guards as carefully as they watch each other. The cruel ones, quick tempers, sharp eyes, you learn to avoid. The quieter ones, the ones who glance away when you stumble, you file away in memory. Because, sometimes, survival means knowing who might look the other way if you slip a crust of bread into your pocket. At night, lying on your plank, you think about these contradictions. How a man in a fur hat can be both executioner and savior in the same breath. How the same hands that beat can also pass bread. You wonder what it does to a person to live that double life, to hold the leash of the dogs one moment and mutter warnings the next. Maybe the guards are just as scarred as the prisoners, only in different ways. Here's joke number 2. Imagine Yelp reviews for Gulag guards. 3 stars shouted a lot, but shared his cigarette. 1 star stole my bread and called me lazy. 5 stars didn't shoot me when I sneezed. Would recommend. The truth is, guard cruelty and guard humanity are 2 sides of the same Siberian coin. You never know which side will face you in the morning, and that uncertainty becomes its own kind of torment as weeks stretch into months. You stop asking whether the guards are good or bad. They're both, sometimes in the same man, sometimes in the same hour. What you learn instead is how to read their eyes, their posture, the set of their mouths. It's a survival skill, as important as hauling logs or clutching your bread, because in the Gulag, the difference between cruelty and kindness can be as small as a glance and as big as life or death. If you thought Siberia had only one season, endless, merciless winter, you were wrong. The Gulag has all of them, and each one brings its own peculiar misery. You quickly learn that there's no good time to be imprisoned here. There are only different flavors of suffering, and the camp cycles through them like a sadistic calendar. Winter, of course, is the reigning monarch. The snow piles so high you forget the color of dirt. The wind howls through the cracks in your barracks, like wolves clawing at the walls. Every breath stings, every exhale turns to frost on your scarf. Frostbite is so common it becomes background noise. You notice a man's ear turn black, or another's fingers go stiff, and nobody gasps anymore. It's just what winter does here. The guards bark roll call while your boots freeze to the ground, and you wonder whether your toes are still attached. Then comes spring, and with it, the thaw. The snow melts into rivers of mud, swallowing boots whole. The camp becomes a swamp of slush, each step a sucking sound that threatens to pull you under. You trade frostbite for trench foot, a rot that eats at your skin until even standing hurts. The barracks smell worse too, the wet wood mixing with mildew, sweat, and despair. You'd think you'd welcome spring after winter, but in the Gulag, every season is just a new set of teeth gnawing at you. Historians still debate which season killed more prisoners, the winter's cold or the summer's insects. You're in no mood for debate. You've felt both, because summer is its own brand of torture. The sun never sets, not really. It hovers low on the horizon, smearing the sky with endless twilight. Mosquitoes swarm so thick you feel like you're breathing them. They dive into your eyes, your ears, your mouth. You slap at them until your skin bleeds, and still they come. Clouds of whining tormentors drawn by the salt of your sweat. Guards laugh sometimes, watching prisoners flail like scarecrows on fire, as if the insects themselves have joined the camp administration. Quirky detail. Some prisoners claimed they learned to tell time by mosquito swarms. Certain hours brought heavier clouds, and you could measure a shift not by the sun, but by how much blood you lost to the buzzing. Imagine wearing a wristwatch like that, except it's made of welts. Autumn doesn't bring relief either. Instead, it brings endless rain, cold, drenching sheets that soak through the barracks roof, turning the floor to puddles and the straw mattresses into sponges. Clothes never dry, blankets never warm. Every morning you pull on boots still wet from the day before, and every night you peel them off with skin raw and red. The mud swallows tools, the wind shakes the watchtowers, and the guards seem angrier than usual, as though even they hate the damp. Here's joke number 1. People love to talk about their favorite season. In the Gulag, your favorite season is whichever one hasn't killed you yet. Each change of season reshuffles the dangers. In winter, you fear the cold will freeze your lungs solid. In spring, you dread drowning in mud. In summer, you curse the mosquitoes and the heat that makes work feel endless. In autumn, you shiver under sheets of rain. There's no such thing as comfort, just different shapes of discomfort cycling endlessly. One night, as mosquitoes drone outside the barracks, you hear a prisoner mutter, "At least the seasons prove time still moves. Otherwise, I'd think this place was eternity." Another man chuckles bitterly and says, "It is eternity. The weather just changes uniforms." You smile despite yourself, because the joke cuts too close to truth. Here's joke number 2. Travel agencies brag about four-season resorts. The Gulag technically has 4 seasons: to misery, mud, mosquitoes, and mildew. No reservations necessary. What the seasons teach you is that the Gulag doesn't need guards to punish you. The land itself is a warden, merciless, creative, and infinitely patient. Nature doesn't care who you are or why you're here. It only demands tribute, paid in blood, sweat, and skin. And year after year, season after season, the camp ensures you pay. When the guard finally calls your name during mail distribution, you almost don't believe it. A letter here. It feels like someone has mistaken you for a person again, instead of just a number on a work log. Your hands shake as you reach out. The guard doesn't even look at you. He just drops the folded scrap of paper into your palm like it's nothing. But it's not nothing. It's the most precious thing you've held in months. The envelope, if it deserves, the name is thin, grimy, and stamped with red ink where the censor's seal shows it's been opened, scanned, and judged. You run your thumb over the crease where another set of hands has pried it apart. Half the words inside might be missing, cut with a black line, or simply torn out altogether. Still, it's a lifeline. You unfold it slowly, like it might disintegrate. The handwriting leaps out familiar loops and curls that tug you back to kitchens and warm lamps, back to the rhythm of life before the barbed wire. Maybe it's your mother's careful scrawl, or your brother's hurried scratches, or your wife's patient curves. Whoever it is, their words reach across miles of snow to touch you, however briefly. The letter says little. It cannot. Censors carve away anything sharp. You read, "We are fine. We hope you are too." A mention of weather, a note about the harvest, a vague hope of reunion someday. Nothing political, nothing emotional, just fragments. But you cling to them like they're scripture. You read them again and again until the ink seems to burn into your eyes. Historians still argue about how much these censored letters truly helped prisoners. Were they a lifeline, keeping hope alive, or a cruel trick, reminding men of everything they'd lost? Maybe both. The letters gave you a glimpse of another world, but they also reminded you just how far away it was. Quirky detail. Some prisoners would trade letters, even other people's letters, just to hold one, just to smell the paper, just to see handwriting from the outside. A page wasn't just communication. It was proof the world still existed beyond the fences. You tuck the letter into your shirt, close to your chest. For a moment, the barracks smells not of mildew and sweat, but of ink and paper, of home. You whisper the words to yourself in the dark, memorizing them, afraid the paper will crumble one day and you'll lose the last trace. Here's joke number 1. These days, people get annoyed if a text takes more than 5 minutes to deliver. In the Gulag, if a letter takes only 6 months to arrive, you throw a party, well, a very quiet one, without food, music, or guests, but still a party. Of course, letters can cut both ways. Some men never receive them, and their faces harden. Each time the guard calls out names that aren't theirs. Others get news they'd rather not know: a wife remarried, a child who no longer remembers their father. You see one man crumble as he reads his letter, hands shaking, then shove it into the stove before anyone can ask. The ashes curl and vanish, but the look on his face lingers long after. Here's joke number 2. The camp mail system was very efficient. You could always count on 2 things. It would arrive late, and it would be missing the part you most wanted. To read. Still, for all its cruelty, for all its gaps and black lines, a letter is a thread. A thin, fragile thread connecting you to a world you sometimes fear you've imagined. When you close your eyes, You can almost picture the sender writing by candlelight, dipping the pen, choosing words carefully so the censors wouldn't strike them out. You can almost feel their hand guiding yours through the paper dot in a place designed to erase you. One small sheet of paper insists you still exist. And for tonight, that is enough. By now, you know the Gulag is more than fences and labor. It's a world held together by stories. After endless hours of hauling logs, shoveling ice, or chiseling rock, the only warmth left at night comes not from the stove but from words. Traded like contraband, it usually begins around the stove itself. That weak metal drum glowing faintly in the middle of the barracks. The heat never reaches the far bunks, but the glow draws prisoners like moths anyway. They cluster close, shoulders hunched, eyes reflecting the embers, and someone begins. Maybe it's a folktale about a cunning fox outsmarting a bear. Maybe it's a joke about bureaucrats drowning in paperwork. Maybe it's just a memory, fragile and trembling, of a wedding feast long ago. Stories ripple outward, passed from one prisoner to the next. A Ukrainian recites verses of Shevchenko by heart. A Pole recounts a tale from Mickiewicz. A Russian hums a half-remembered lullaby, and soon others murmur the missing words. No one cares about accuracy. The point isn't truth, but the act of remembering. For a moment, you are more than a prisoner. You are part of a circle, a community, a fragile rebellion against silence. Historians still argue whether such storytelling was simply survival mechanism or genuine cultural resistance. Was it just a way to pass time, or was it proof that identity and memory couldn't be erased? You don't need to argue, feel it. The moment a prisoner begins to speak, the barrack transforms. Frost fades, hunger quiets, and for a few minutes, you're somewhere else entirely. Quirky detail: some camps developed entire camp theaters. Prisoners performed plays, recited poetry, even staged makeshift operas using costumes sewn from rags. Officially, these were sometimes permitted as morale boosters. Unofficially, they became acts of defiance, keeping alive the cultures the state was trying to flatten. Imagine watching Hamlet played out in Siberia, with prisoners draped in blankets and guards pretending not to notice. Here's joke number 1. You've heard of open mic nights at cafes. The Gulag had its own version. No coffee, no applause, but plenty of heckling if your story dragged on too long. Even in small exchanges, stories save lives. One night, a man next to you whispers about the bread his wife used to bake, warm and golden, with butter melting on top. You close your eyes and taste it. Hunger makes you ache, but it also fills you with strange strength. Tomorrow, you'll still swing the shovel, but tonight, you've eaten in your mind. Another prisoner tells a joke about Stalin's speeches. Comrades, our country is rich in forests. And someone mutters, yes, and we are the unlucky lumberjacks. The barracks chuckle softly, covering their mouths. Humor here is sharper than a pickaxe, but it keeps you from collapsing. Here's joke number 2. If laughter adds years to your life, then every chuckle in the Gulag should have earned parole. Too bad the guards never counted them. The stove pops, sparks flicker, and the stories keep flowing. You realize that in a place where bread is scarce and blankets thin, words become a second ration. Shared memory is food for the soul, and laughter is heat for the heart. When you finally crawl back onto your plank, the hunger gnaws again, the cold creeps in, the lice bite at your skin. But you hold a story in your head, like an ember cupped in your hands. And for a moment, you're warmer than the Gulag wants you to be. The Gulag is supposed to feel timeless, as though history has forgotten you and the outside world no longer exists. But history has a way of creeping under the barbed wire, whether Stalin likes it or not. Even here, in the farthest reaches of Siberia, whispers drift in rumors, carried by new arrivals, by guards with loose tongues, even by fragments of censored newspapers that somehow slip through. And those whispers, once they take root, spread faster than frost across the barracks. Walls. At first, it's small things. Someone mutters that German troops are advancing deeper into the Soviet Union. Another swears he heard from a transport guard that Hitler has captured Kyiv. You don't know if it's true half the time. No one does. But it doesn't matter. The hunger for news is as strong as the hunger for bread. Every rumor is chewed over, swallowed, and passed along like contraband soup. Some prisoners allow themselves dangerous hope. If Hitler wins, one man whispers, maybe Stalin will fall, maybe the camps will open. Others shush him, eyes darting toward the guards, but the idea sticks like a splinter. Could war mean freedom? Or would it mean death before freedom ever arrived? Historians still debate how much the Gulag population knew about the ebb and flow of the Second World War. Some accounts suggest prisoners stayed almost completely in the dark. Others say rumor networks were so efficient they often knew before the guards did. You believe the latter because even here, whispers find cracks. Information is oxygen, and humans always find a way to breathe. Quirky detail: some prisoners memorized maps of Europe drawn in the dirt or scratched into planks. A man from Leningrad would draw the front lines with a nail, updating them whenever new rumors arrived. Over time, the map became less accurate than hopeful fronts, always creeping closer to Moscow's defeat, as though prisoners could will history in their favor. Here's joke number 1. Modern people argue online about fake news. In the Gulag, you didn't need Twitter rumors spread just as fast, and fact-checking was even harder. Sources say Hitler is dead. Which sources? My bunkmates' cousins, guards, brothers, dog. Sometimes the rumors are darker. Word trickles in that entire villages have been burned in Belarus, that Leningrad is starving, that families across Europe are being deported to camps of their own. The barracks fall silent when these stories spread. Misery loves company, but sometimes it terrifies you to realize the whole world is a camp in its own way. Then, one day, something undeniable pierces the camp walls. A new transport arrives, ragged men in uniforms, scorched by war. They whisper about Stalingrad, about Germans advancing, Soviets pushing back, about battles where entire cities crumble into ash. The stories crackle with energy, and suddenly the barracks hums with questions. Could this mean the end? Could the war actually touch Stalin himself? Here's joke number 2. One prisoner quips, if Hitler and Stalin both lose, maybe we'll finally win. The barrack chuckles, quickly, nervously, then falls silent again. Humor is fragile when hope itself feels treasonous. At night, you lie on your plank and think about those whispers. You imagine tanks rolling through snow, planes streaking the sky, soldiers stumbling through the same cold that gnaws your bones. You wonder if the war will erase the Gulag, or if the Gulag will simply outlast the war, swallowing survivors and deserters alike. The rumors keep flowing. Sometimes they contradict each other so wildly you laugh. Hitler dead one day, marching on Moscow the next. But the important thing isn't truth, it's that the outside world still exists. The Gulag wants you to believe you've been erased from history. Rumors remind you that history is still moving, and maybe, just maybe, it hasn't finished with you yet. The Gulag is designed to feel timeless, as if your life has been removed from the calendar entirely. Days blur into each other, weeks collapse into the same gray mud, and you stop asking what month it is because the answer doesn't matter. That's the plan. To convince you that the outside world no longer exists, that the only reality is the fence, the frost, and the hunger. But history doesn't play along. Even here, in the farthest reaches of Siberia, news trickles through the cracks. It comes in fragments, like smoke sneaking under a locked door. Sometimes it arrives in the form of new prisoners, their faces still marked by the chaos outside. Sometimes it's a careless word from a guard, muttered as he stamps his feet against the cold. Sometimes it's nothing more than a scrap of newspaper, half-burned and used as kindling. Its ink blurred, but legible enough to set imaginations on fire. At first, it's small whispers. Someone says the Germans have taken Kyiv. Another swears Hitler's troops are marching on Moscow. Someone else insists the Red Army is already winning. None of it is confirmed, but that doesn't matter. In a place starved of hope, even rumors are feasts. Prisoners chew them over the way they gnaw their black bread slowly, desperately, clinging to every crumb. Hope, though, is dangerous. One man whispers, if Hitler wins, Stalin will fall. The camps will vanish. His voice trembles, not with excitement, but with fear because even hoping out loud is treason. The other prisoners shush him, eyes darting toward the barracks door. The guard pacing outside doesn't need to hear, but you know the walls have ears. Even the stove might betray you. Still, the idea plants itself like a seed in frozen ground. Could war mean release? Could outside forces break the barbed wire that feels stronger than steel? The thought flickers in your chest like a forbidden candle. Historians still argue about how much Gulag prisoners knew of the war. Some say the camps were hermetically sealed, the prisoners as cut off as if on another planet. Others insist the rumor network was so efficient that news traveled faster than trains. You believe the latter because you see it happen. A whisper tonight becomes common knowledge tomorrow. Entire barracks buzz with debates based on nothing more than a guard's sigh or a half-legible headline. Quirky detail. Some prisoners created makeshift maps. You see one man scratch Europe into the floorboards with a nail, updating the front lines whenever new rumors arrive. He pushes the German line back when he hears of Soviet victories, then redraws it when someone says the Wehrmacht is advancing again. The map is probably nonsense, but it's more than a drawing. It's a claim that the world outside still matters, still moves, still touches you even here, of course. Not all news carries hope. Some rumors drip poison instead. A man whispers that villages in Belarus have been burned. Another swears he heard that Leningrad is starving, its people boiling wallpaper glue just to eat. Still, another claims entire families are being deported west, crammed into cattle cars bound for camps worse than this one. The barracks grow quiet when these stories spread. Even in misery, you can be shocked by the scale of misery elsewhere. Then, one day, something undeniable pierces the silence. A new transport arrives, men gaunt and ragged, but not from farms or factories. They wear uniforms, burned, torn, bloody. Soldiers, they bring stories of they describe streets turned into rubble, tanks frozen into monuments, and fighting so brutal the city itself seemed alive with fire. You lean forward, drinking in every word. The war isn't far anymore, it's on the Volga, pounding at the gates of history. The camp hums with questions. Could the Soviets turn the tide? Could this mean Stalin himself is vulnerable? Some whisper that victory might bring amnesty, that prisoners will be freed to join the fight. Others scoff bitterly, muttering that Stalin would rather see you die behind barbed wire than give you a rifle. Here's joke number 1 in the Gulag. Fake news spreads faster than frost. Hitler is dead. Someone whispers, "Really?" "Yes, my bunkmates, cousins, guards, brother heard it from his dog." If you laugh quietly, because hope is funny only until it isn't, single quotes teed the guards. But you can see them listening too. They have families outside cities they once called home. They know the war is real. Sometimes you catch them staring at the horizon like prisoners themselves, as if wondering whether the front will ever reach this frozen outpost. At night, lying on your plank, you replay the whispers. You imagine tanks rolling across white fields, planes streaking overhead, cities burning. You picture Hitler and Stalin like gods wrestling in the snow, shaking the world while you, a prisoner, can do nothing but shiver. You wonder whether the war will erase the Gulag or whether the Gulag will outlast the war, swallowing deserters, refugees, and survivors alike. Quirky detail. A few brave souls risk carving secret diaries, recording each rumor, each shift in the supposed front. You see one such notebook, passed like treasure. It's not accurate, but accuracy isn't the point. It's history written by the erased. A desperate attempt to keep time moving inside a place built to stop it. Here's joke number 2. One prisoner mutters, "If Hitler and Stalin both lose, maybe we'll finally win." The barracks chuckle nervously, covering their mouths, the laughter fragile as frost. Humor is the only way to handle hope without letting it break you. The rumors keep coming, contradicting themselves so wildly they become theater. Hitler is dead. Hitler is alive. The Soviets are winning. The Soviets are losing. None of it matters. What matters is that the world still turns. The Gulag wants you to believe you've been erased, but whispers prove otherwise. When you close your eyes, the frost still bites, the hunger still gnaws. But now there's something else, an echo of footsteps, marching across distant fields, drawing nearer, nearer. History is moving, and no amount of barbed wire can keep it from brushing against your skin. Release. The very word tastes strange in your mouth. It's something you've repeated in your head 1,000 times, like a prayer. Yet, when it finally comes, it feels more like a rumor than a reality. In the Gulag, release doesn't arrive with fanfare. There's no trumpets, no warm handshake. It's a line read off a list, a muttered order from a clerk in a fur hat, the scratching of a pen across a ledger. You're done, they tell you. But done with what? The sentence, the suffering, yourself. Some men stagger home after years behind the wire, if home still exists. They limp through villages in rags, shaved heads hidden under caps, ribs showing through clothes that hang like laundry on a broken line. They knock on doors that sometimes open with tears and sometimes don't open at all because families have vanished, deported, starved, or too afraid to welcome a former prisoner. The cruelest thing isn't always the Gulag itself. Sometimes it's finding out you no longer belong to the world you dreamed of returning to. Historians still argue about the percentage of Gulag inmates who were ever released. Official records insist millions walked free. Survivors whisper that release was less a gift and more a lottery ticket. You might leave one camp only to be sent to another. Further east, further north, further away. Stalin's empire was generous with paperwork, stingy with actual freedom. Quirky detail. Some prisoners described their release papers as death sentences in disguise. You could be freed in Siberia in the middle of winter with no shoes, no food, and no transport. Congratulations, You're free to walk 1,000 frozen miles until nature decides your fate. You witness both kinds of endings. One man, skin sagging, over bones, is shoved onto a sled with a stamped paper in hand, his eyes shining as if he's already home. Another is told his sentence is finished, only to be marched to a different rail car, bound for another camp. His face crumples, but he doesn't resist. Resistance is long dead in him. Here's joke number 1. It's like being told you've won a vacation package. Surprise, you're free. Free to walk through wolf country with no coat. Free to starve in a new town where no one dares hire you. Free to be arrested again next month for the crime of surviving. 5 stars. Would not recommend. And yet, sometimes men really do make it home. You hear of a prisoner who stumbled back into his village after 10 years, knocking on the door of his own house. His wife fainted when she saw him. She thought she'd been a widow for half a decade. The neighbors didn't celebrate. They whispered instead, watching him like a ghost. Once branded an enemy of the people, you never shake it off. The Gulag follows you even when the wire is far behind. Release doesn't always mean joy. For some, it means exile. You're free from the camp, but not free to return home. You're dumped in a settlement in Kazakhstan, or a nameless Siberian town, ordered to work in a factory for rehabilitation. Your sentence has ended, but the barbed wire has only changed shape. Here's joke number 2. In the Gulag dictionary, release is defined as moving you from one frozen nightmare to another with slightly fewer dogs. You picture your own end. Will you be lucky enough to step outside the gates, squinting into sunlight without chains? Or will your release be a silent one, a burial under the pines where wolves sing the only eulogy? You can't decide which fate feels more real. At night, the barracks buzz with rumors of amnesty, Stalin granting freedom to political prisoners to bolster the war effort, or because quotas have been met, or simply because the paperwork says so. Some men cling to these whispers, marking imaginary dates in their heads. Others shake their heads and say, no one leaves the zone, not really. And maybe they're right. Because even those who do walk away don't ever escape. The Gulag brands itself into your bones. Its hunger, its cold, its silence follow you like shadows. A man can leave the wire, but the wire never leaves the man. The camp breaks you down with cold, hunger, and back-breaking labor, but sometimes it doesn't even need to lift a finger. Disease takes over where the guards leave off. It creeps quietly, invisible at first, until suddenly half the barracks is coughing, shivering, or too weak to rise. By your second week, you begin to notice that the so-called infirmary isn't a place of healing at all. It's a holding pen, a dim wooden barrack where people go when their bodies can't keep pace anymore. Most don't come back. Coughs echo like gunfire in the night, sharp and hacking, leaving trails of blood on sleeves and straw. Lips split and bleed from the dry cold. Feet swell with frostbite until the skin blackens, splitting like charred logs. The smell of sickness clings to everything: sore, sweat, damp rags, and the metallic temps of blood that no amount of boiling water can wash away. You catch yourself holding your breath when you pass the infirmary door, as though air itself might infect you. Typhus is the monster everyone dreads. Lice carry it, and lice are everywhere. In the straw mattresses, in your clothes, crawling across scalps as casually as ants on sugar. A fever comes first, then delirium, then death. Dysentery is another demon your body, wrung dry, strength gone in a day, dignity gone in an hour, and pneumonia. Well, the freezing air and the damp barracks make sure of that. a cough today, a rattle tomorrow, silence the day after. You feel the sickness in yourself, too, the constant trembling that never leaves your hands, the ache in your spine when you stand too long, the dizziness that makes the snowy ground spin in circles when you bend to lift a log. Your reflection in a puddle startles you. You look pale, hollow-eyed, almost unrecognizable. You start to understand why veterans of the camps used to say, "A healthy man lasts 3 months here. A strong man, maybe 6. Historians still argue whether medical neglect in the gulags was deliberate policy or simply the result of impossible logistics. Siberia is vast, transport is slow, and medicine scarce. Was the Soviet state incapable of caring, or simply unwilling? Either way, the result is the same. Lying here with cracked lips and bleeding gums, you don't care which footnote historians favor. To you, the lack of treatment feels weaponized. When you're too busy fighting typhus, you don't have energy left to think of escape or rebellion. There are small, strange efforts at medicine. Garlic, cloves, handed out like golden tickets, chewed slowly, savored for their sting. A spoonful of fish oil pressed into your hand like liquid sunlight, even though it coats your tongue with nausea. Once, a nurse sprinkles powdered sulfur on the straw, swearing it will drive away lice. The lice don't care. They're the true kings of the camp, feasting on everyone equally. Quirky detail. Some prisoners swore they could predict who would die soon just by listening to the cough. A dry cough meant maybe you'd endure. A wet rattle meant the end was near. In the silence of the night, you start hearing coughs like ticking clocks, counting down lives in the darkness. The infirmary itself is dim, smoky, lined with bunks, squeezed so tight you wonder how anyone breathes. Prisoner orderlies shuffle about, hands raw from boiling sheets, eyes tired from watching too many fade away. Supplies are laughable. Rags instead of bandages, snow instead of ice packs, boiled pine needles masquerading as medicine. And yet, those orderlies still press damp cloths to foreheads, still lift spoons of soup to trembling lips. Here's joke number 1. You ever complain about waiting 2 hours to see your doctor? Try the Gulag. Here, you'll wait 2 days, and the only doctor available is probably just a fellow prisoner with less training than a Boy Scout. The good news, at least there's no copay. You watch men return from the infirmary, gaunt and trembling, their faces marked by the grim knowledge that they've survived this time. One man hobbles back, with feet wrapped in rags, where toes used to be. Another doesn't come back at all. At dawn, you see his body loaded onto a sled with others, taken beyond the fence. The snow swallows them without ceremony. You wonder if wolves follow those sled tracks, trailing the scent of mortality. And yet, even in the infirmary, moments of humanity flare up like embers. A prisoner drapes his own threadbare blanket over a fevered comrade. Another breaks his bread, ration in half, and presses the piece into the hand of a man too weak to chew without help. You wonder whether those gestures extend life, or if they simply make the final hours less lonely. Maybe that's enough. Here's joke number 2. They say laughter is the best medicine. In the Gulag, that's technically true, because it's also the only medicine left in stock. If you can make your bunkmate laugh at your misery, you've already given him something rarer than soup or bread. The truth is unavoidable. The guards don't need rifles to kill. The climate doesn't need blizzards to crush you. Disease does the job cleanly, quietly, relentlessly. In this frozen world, sickness is just another warden, invisible but everywhere. And unlike the guards, it doesn't take bribes, it doesn't sleep, and it never misses a shift. You learn quickly that the Gulag survives not only on labor and hunger, but also on silence. Every whisper, every scrap of rumor, every flicker of resistance feels like contraband. And yet, in the shadows of the barracks, whispers still find a way. It begins with songs. Late at night, when the guards are fewer and the barracks creak in uneasy sleep, you hear someone hum a tune. It's faint, almost swallowed by the wind pushing through the cracks. Maybe it's an old folk song, maybe a hymn, maybe a lullaby from home. Soon, a second voice joins, then another. The voices stay low, barely audible, as though even melody must tiptoe. But in those moments, the barrack feels less like a coffin and more like a human place again. Sometimes it's not music but words. A prisoner leans close, mutters a line of poetry, half remembered, half invented. Another scratches a symbol into a plank of wood with a nail, small enough to be mistaken for a splinter. A third carves initials on the underside of his bunk, a tiny rebellion that says, "I was here." To anyone else, it's nothing. To him, it's proof he hasn't vanished completely. Historians still argue whether these fragments of resistance mattered. Politically, whether they had the power to push back against the system more, if they were only personal lifelines. From where you sit, they matter more than rations. They feed something hunger and cold can't touch. Quirky detail in some camps. Prisoners devised invisible letters. They'd press messages into paper using a blunt object without ink, leaving faint indentations. Later, when the paper was held to the light, the words appeared like ghosts. Imagine the danger. One mistake, one careless glance, and the guards could add years or take your life. And yet, they wrote anyway. One night, you watch a group huddled near the stove, trading stories like bread. A man recites Pushkin's verses from memory, his voice trembling but steady. Another counters with a Ukrainian folktale. Then a Polish prisoner shares a joke about bureaucrats who could drown in ink before they ever noticed water. The men chuckle, softly, covering their mouths, the laughter as fragile as frost on glass. But it spreads warmth in a place that never gives any. Here's joke number 1. In a world where bread is currency, stories are like free samples. They won't fill your stomach, but they remind you you're still alive enough to crave more. Not all resistance is gentle. Some prisoners mutter curses about Stalin under their breath, quick and bitter. Others smuggle tiny notes through supply wagons, trying to reach families or foreign ears. You hear rumors of a man caught passing such a note. They say he vanished into a punishment cell and was never seen again. That's the cost of even the smallest act of defiance. And yet, silence is never absolute. The camp can starve you, shave you, bury you under frost, but it can't make you stop remembering songs. It can't make you forget words you learned as a child. And so, prisoners keep humming, keep whispering, keep scratching lines into wood, as if their voices were chisels against stone. Here's joke number 2. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. In the Gulag, the pen is usually broken, stolen, or eaten by rats. But give a prisoner a nail, and suddenly, what becomes a library, lying on your bunk. You trace the carvings left by others, initials, dates, symbols that look like mountains or rivers. You wonder if anyone will ever see them once you're gone, or if the wood will simply rot into silence. But even if it does, you know this much. For one night, 1 hour, 1 whisper, the camp didn't win completely. Resistance here isn't grand or fiery. It's not an uprising or a banner waved. It's a hum in the dark, a line of poetry scratched in secret, a whispered memory of home. Small things, but sometimes small things keep you alive longer than bread. Ghosts don't always wear sheets. Sometimes they wear prison rags, and they live inside you. When you finally look back on your time in the Gulag, you realize it never really ended. The gates might fade behind you, the watchtowers shrink into memory, but the Gulag itself fits hunger. It's cold. Its silence walks beside you everywhere you go. You notice it first in the small things. Bread on a table makes your hands twitch as though you'll need to guard it with your life. A door slamming shut makes you flinch because you hear it as the creak of iron hinges on punishment cells. Winter winds rattle your window at night, and suddenly you're back on the frozen parade ground. Boots sinking into ice while the guards count you again and again. Historians still argue what the Gulag left behind, whether it was mainly an economic scar, a cultural silence, or a human wound. To you, it's all three. Millions passed through, millions more waited at home, wondering if their loved ones would ever return. The camps left a mark, not only on bodies, but on entire generations. Quirky detail. Survivors often described how, years later, they still hoarded scraps of food, hiding bits of bread in pockets or under pillows, even when pantries were full. One man admitted he could never eat soup without scanning the bowl first, searching instinctively for the cabbage leaf that proved it wasn't just hot water. The body forgets slowly, and the stomach not at all. You sometimes dream of faces long gone, a man who shared his crust with you, another who stole yours, the guard who looked away when you stumbled, the one who laughed when you froze. They visit you in the dark, not to haunt, but to remind. The Gulag wasn't just a place, it was a world, and everyone who entered it became part of you. Here's joke number 1. People talk about moving on from the Gulag. That's like moving on from frostbite. Sure, your toes heal, but every winter they ache like ghosts of themselves. The older you grow, the more you realize the wire never rusts away completely. You walk city streets, hear laughter spilling from cafes, see children running free, and you still half expect a whistle to blow, ordering you back in line. Freedom feels fragile, temporary, like a mistake someone will correct any moment. And yet, there's another truth. Survival itself becomes its own quiet defiance. You endured the hunger, the roll calls, the mosquitoes, the frost, the dogs, the endless grind. You walked out alive when so many didn't. That survival is a scar, yes, but also a story. You carry it, you tell it, you pass it down. So the silence the camp demanded can never fully win. Here's joke number 2. When people ask you for life advice, you chuckle and say, well, I once learned how to sleep standing up in -30 degrees. Everything else is easy after that. The ghosts of the Gulag don't frighten you anymore. They sit with you, quiet companions. Some whisper sorrow, others laughter, most just hum with the simple reminder, you were there, you endured, you remain. And now, as this story closes, you can feel the edges soften. The snow fades, the fences dissolve, the barracks grow still. What lingers is not the cold or the hunger, but the warmth of memory, fragile though it may be. The Gulag taught you that survival is not always loud, not always heroic. Sometimes it's as simple as standing in line, as stubborn as humming a tune under your breath, as defiant as clutching a crust of bread and calling it life. So now, as the lights dim, picture the frost receding. Picture the watchtowers fading into mist. Picture yourself walking, not stumbling, but walking beyond the wire. And even if you carry it with you forever, know that the story is no longer holding you prisoner. Sleep well tonight. You've walked through the Gulag and out the other side. And tomorrow, The sun will rise on a world larger than the fence. Asterisk, and now, let's soften everything. Let it drift into quiet. Imagine the snow still falling, but slowly now, gently, like feathers. The barbed wire no longer cuts the horizon, it's just a faint sketch, dissolving into the distance. The dogs, the guards, the shouts, even the hunger, they all dim, fading like echoes at the edge of hearing. What remains is stillness. You lie back, eyes closing, and the air feels warmer, calmer, safer. The Gulag, with all its cold and cruelty, has shrunk into a story told long ago. What surrounds you now is the hum of night, steady and kind, wrapping you in a blanket that no frost can pierce. Think of the stove in the barracks, not sputtering and weak this time, but glowing steady, casting a soft circle of orange light. Around it, the faces are not hollowed by hunger, but softened by peace. They hum, they murmur, they tell stories, and their voices weave together like threads of cloth, strong enough to cover you, to keep you safe. Let your breathing slow, in and out. The harsh winds have stilled. The mosquitoes are gone. The roll calls have ended. All that's left is the quiet certainty that you are here, you are whole, you are free. And as you drift deeper, imagine the first light of dawn, not harsh, not blinding, but gentle. It spreads across snow that no longer feels cold, but sparkles like crystal under the sun. That's where we leave this story, not in pain, not in struggle, but in that quiet, shimmering moment of release. Good night, my friend. Rest easy. You are safe now.